this programming, there's gonna be a lot of people that, like I said, they don't want to PR their deadlift, they just want to be healthier. Our programming will be a little bit more specialized, so we want to make sure that we're providing those people good workouts and they're not in those compromised positions with a lot of stress on their low back. So they're not doing conventional deadlift, a block pull, you know what I mean, all these like hinging movements if they don't need to be doing that. So these are ways I think about regressing movements. So this could be your primary movement, your deadlift. This could be your secondary movement. So your primary assistance, like a deficit or like a block pull or something like that. Reducing range of motion. So putting people up on blocks. Putting them even on trap bars sometimes. Putting them on trap bar, on blocks. Sumo. Sumo reduces the range of motion. Like I said, it reduces the torque on the hip and keeps the torso more upright. Sumo on blocks as well. And then reduce the loadability, so making sure like that people can't load the weight as heavy or the bar as heavy, so using things like tempos, using things like pauses, kettlebells, dumbbells, even putting someone on a single leg. So if you had someone like Mike Scott's parents who come in and they're doing like their deadlifts, and then we're like, all right, primary assistance movement, RDL, and they're like, my low back is torched. Okay, like what if I put you in a kettlebell B stance RDL? You're still doing the hinge movement, you're holding a 15-pound kettlebell, and you're still getting kind of what we want, or an actual single leg version, which could be even better for their balance. Zercher holds, this is something we did the other day too. My elbows still hurt. But putting someone in this position, they may hate it, but you can actually do your hinges from here. And the bar is way closer to the body. You cannot lift any weight the first time you do it, and it just looks kind of cool. That is another way, and then these kind of go back, again, decreasing the amount of shearing force on the low back, so just the amount of pressure on that lower back. So that's like using things like, again, trap bar, putting them on sumo, putting them on blocks, putting them on a Zercher hold, something like that. The bar is not stressing the low back as much. Those are all kind of strategies. I put a bunch of things up there on like orders. So block pull is going to be closest to the variation. So that would be like my first go-to if someone's like, my low back's hurting, put them on a block. You could also try to get them sumo. You could go sumo from blocks. Trap bar is awesome. Trap bar from blocks, kettlebells or dumbbells. You could do sumo, you could do conventional with those. And then applying tempo too, because tempo reduces the amount you can load the bar. These are, is there anything that you guys, I'm gonna go over before that. RDLs are one that we're gonna use a lot. And they're one that they're tough sometimes to coach, especially right off the start for newer people. Most people, two things happen. They can't keep the proper shin angle. So the proper shin angle is a positive shin angle where the knees are slightly over the foot, and they can't control their center of mass. So where their mass is basically distributed, they can't control keeping the pressure in their whole foot while their hips are moving back. I was trying to get people the other day to really think about, for both of these, like it is just the reverse of a deadlift. So at the top, you get people here, you get people to hinge back and be like, how would you reverse this if I provided you like an eccentric deadlift, right? You would hinge, as the bar crossed the knees, you would push the knees forward. That was a little bit low for an RDL, but again, it would be the same thing. Hinge, knees slightly forward, hips go through. That's kind of the movement we want. The shins get a little bit more vertical. What you'll see a lot is this, which is like, people, I feel a lot in my hamstrings, which is true, but it doesn't get that same movement that we're going for most people, which is to emphasize the top part, the hamstring, the glute complex, in that hip extension.
Austin, I think a lot of times what you just demoed is a very big difference between like a good morning and a RDL, and the reverse shin,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Where the shin goes backwards is essentially the good morning, right? So
Yeah.
even just explaining perhaps one little movement and showing them that is super beneficial, I find. It gets them right into the right spot.
Okay, yeah, I like that. That's a good point too, right? It's like a lot of our members, a lot of advanced people too are like, we do so many different movements and the shin angles are different, but people like Bard and people like, you know what I mean, Amy Fenton or anyone like that, they can handle that. And they've been, like Bart still hinges like this, getting him to think about, hey, like this is your RDL, that's a great good morning though, right? Like when we go to good mornings, that's the shin angle we want, that's what we want you to feel. I think like the biggest area with these, again, this like controlling the center of mass is everything. So how they're distributing their weight. If you can get people to get the weight in the middle of their foot somehow and get their foot to pronate, meaning getting the inside edge of their foot pushed into the ground, that's going to get their hips into more internal rotation. So just their hips go more in the socket, which allows their hips to move back easier. So if they're externally rotated like this and they're hinging back, they're going to run out of space in their hip socket a little bit quicker and produce less force than someone who has weight right here, right there, and it is hinging a little bit more. That's the thing I try and get to people, but it's very difficult to cue that without adding constraints to the exercise. So these are some constraints you can add to the exercise that I really like. But we did this actually on Saturday, but you can do this with plates. I'm just using the mat because it's here, but toes elevated. So if you put someone up like this with their toes elevated, it can be seen as a regression or a progression. So it's a regression in the fact that it moves their center of mass back. It allows them to keep the weight in the center of their foot as their hips go back, so they can feel that whole foot pressure while hinging. It can be seen as a progression because it pre-stretches their posterior chain a little bit more, so their calf all the way up to their hamstring. So when they move back, they're getting a little bit more tension in that area. That's my go-to though, is the toes elevated for some people to get them to feel that position. Trap bar does the same thing. So if you put someone on a trap bar with that neutral grip and they hinge, it's gonna get them a lot more midfoot pressure and be easier for them to move their hips back in space.
So is that
as they go.
good for somebody who's like, if you see someone that's the weight's always seems to pulling them forward, like they're always in their toes?
It could be, yeah.
That'll put them back a little bit more.
Yeah, I think this would be the best variation, or not the best, but it would be a good variation for people that are falling too back on their heels too.
Okay.
I would use that mostly if I saw someone falling back on their heels while they're trying to hinge. This is something I would use for them and say like, putting your toes up.
What would you use the opposite way, like people that are getting pulled forward?
Someone that's getting pulled forward, you could put a band around the waist so they're getting their hips pulled back.
Okay.
You could also like make sure they're keeping that bar tight and then put them up against a wall or a rig or something where they have to shoot their hips back and then drive through. Landmine variations do the same. So if you use a landmine with someone, it puts their center mass in a better position for them to feel their weight move back while they have that whole foot pressure. Also just decreases the load. So it's a little bit easier for people to complete. KV, dumbbells, RDL, or kettlebells, same thing. It reduces the complexity, reduces the loading ability. And then going into, like, these are more later stage ones where someone who really needs to be regressed because of something like their low back's bothering them or something like that could be a good tool. So B stance, RDLs, it just obviously, right, it like reduces how much they can load the bar, or the dumbbell, kettlebell, and most people can shift in their hips to get that like internal rotation that we talked about. So getting their hips shot back a little bit better than in that double leg stance. So if you get someone to kind of turn their pelvis into that side, their hip goes in, and then you hinge back, their hips can move a little bit better. Single leg RDLs do the same thing, and then like a Zercher as well. One I really like for the B stance is if you take someone and you put the foam roller right here. You can hold it on this side, you can hold it on this side, but if you get them to push your knee in to the side and you hinge back, that's also going to promote that same rotation at the hip joint that we want. So it's going to force them to push their knee in. If their knee is inside their hip, their glute is wrapped around their hip, and they're going to be strongest in that position. And then just like the tempo, getting them to slow down, building that awareness around what they're doing. And then those are just like miscellaneous things. So swing, kettlebell swings, hip thrusts. If you want, you can throw someone even on a box squat, or just say, hey, we're not gonna do it today. Sam Stankono comes in, my low back's bothering me. Say, do a front squat. You don't need to do a million RDLs today. Things like that, just to think about.
Is there anyone that you would not encourage to do, like for instance, the one that you just did on the roller to push their knee? Is there anyone that you would say like, this is like not good for?
That's a good question. Like, if you have someone that's already very like, has wide hips and already has like a ton of like knee cave kind of in this position here, that might not be a great choice because they're already in that position already, and they're probably already getting enough of that. They're probably not pushing their hips back because of a different reason. Their knee is already in here a lot. Trying to get them to drive their knee in a little bit farther might not be a great choice.
That would be applicable to like what Nikki said, what Nikki put out today with Mandy, right?
Yes.
Getting her knee.
100%.
Right. People are gonna go, they've built like a comfort, their body naturally is like, their brain and their body connects to the easiest place for them to go. Like Marcella, on your squat, your body naturally wants to go back to that spot because that's where you feel strongest, where we need to put them in the opposite position where they're weakest more often. So driving that knee out would be the answer for, yeah, and it's usually like people with big hips, like the shorter, heavier set people generally, that's what I've been seeing in the from the membership.
Yeah.
Or tall, lanky, like longer legs like Mandy or Joe.
100%. And that like comes down to looking at the person and figuring out where they're at. Because a lot of our members are stuck in positions that don't allow them to do the exercise efficiently. So someone that walks like this, where their pelvis is dumped forward and they go to hinge back, they're gonna run out of space again in the back of their hips. Their femur is gonna be pushing back already like this. So they're gonna keep pushing back and they're not gonna have any room to hinge. They're gonna run out of space and then they're gonna do something weird. So if you see someone like that, you gotta like cue them like ribs down, or like someone could be the opposite. Someone's like this and they're hinging and they're slouching forward. So just kind of looking at the individual and being like, all right, where are they? Might not even be that they don't know how to do it. It's just like the positioning they're in is difficult to start. Is there anything we didn't cover that you guys are seeing, or? It's a wrap.
Good job, Austin.
Good job.
Yeah, that's great, Austin.
You definitely went to school. Good work.
You're so smart.
Holy.